I was listening to us talk about carrots and the number of carrots that is recommended with the square foot gardening method. Was it 16 per square foot?
Yeah.
I'm like, I'd never grow 16 carrots in a square foot. And I have experience with some great carrots that weren't grown that close together. And I look at it to say, I want to grow more, but I also want to be obedient to what I know works for my space.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's important. How dare you talk bad about square foot gardening? I can't believe it. We
Mm.
sit here on this show and talk about it. I think
Sounds very anti square foot gardening, is what it sounds like.
it does. We've said it before, but I think it's a good guide. But again, in those rules for square foot gardening, they are absolutely meant to be broken
Hmm.
in the opposite direction for the most part. But it's definitely a good guide.
I think it's, I mean, just a quick note, I think it's beautiful from the perspective of it is the reminder of the different types of things and how much can be grown in a particular space.
Yeah,
Like in most cases, it's outlined in the idea of a bed, a garden bed, a raised bed, and these are all the things that you're growing. A part of the reason that I first looked at square foot gardening, I could be misremembering this, but it was, yeah, what can I fit in space? But when I saw the charts, I thought, oh, I hadn't considered growing leeks, which I'm
yeah.
still not growing, but it really kind of just expanded beyond going to the grocery store and saying, I want to grow this, this, and this. It expanded my mind a bit because I could see it visually on, oh, I could be interested in growing this. I could be interested in growing that, and I had some type of, outline for what could be successful.
Well, you know what changed got me into square foot gardening,
Mm.
and I don't square foot garden for the record. I use it as a loose guide, but um, when I saw for the first time when somebody said I am a square foot gardener, and I saw what they had growing, I said that's it. And the whole drive was they were getting so much out of a bed, or they had so much
Yeah.
growing in a bed. Let me put it that way. Never saw the harvest, but um, that is what drew me into it. So, obviously, my drive in my garden is how much can I get out of this garden? Like, what is the
Yeah.
most that I can get? And finding that out is my personal goal for every single year. Write it down, figure out how much you can get out of your garden because right now my garden is about as big as I want. And I've said this before, but and it didn't grow this year. It got consolidated.
Hmm. Hmm.
But
Hmm.
I think the space that I have is as much as I care to do personally in the setup that it's in. So if that's the case and I need to get more food, I'm thoroughly convinced with those techniques that I mentioned earlier, we can absolutely figure that out. So if we go back to the front porch garden, the one
Hmm.
garden bed that's supposed to have, tulips in it or something, you know what I mean? And instead we're putting vegetables, planting a couple cabbages. You know, if you're limited in space, it's not necessarily you can grow anything you want, but you want to pick the crops that are going to give you the most out of that small space. So broccoli is not a good choice, right? You're going to get one head of broccoli, but a head of
Yeah.
cabbage is going to give you for a family two to three side dishes, possibly. You know what I mean? So you
Let me
can
challenge you there.
go for it.
So, in large part, my broccoli starts did so well, and I'm probably going to have more broccoli in my garden than I ever have because they did so well compared to some others. Um, I enjoy broccoli more than I enjoy cabbage. And
Right.
I look at that and say, I am going to get more out of the garden by growing X number of like plants for broccoli compared to X number of plants of cabbage. It's more of a burden to grow the same number of cabbage as I do broccoli, meaning I'd grow cabbage, less cabbage than I grow broccoli. But that's my preference, right? And that could change in 3 years. And that's the piece that I just want to make sure we're giving ourselves a little bit of room to explore and change our minds, right? And adjust. Because when you think about what we're doing, This is not for Young Ben's garden. It's not written in stone. It's not permanent when it comes to what you're growing and the quantity you're growing, right? That it's yeah, sure you're following about the same amount of onions, about the same amount of garlic, about the same amount of cabbage heads, but you have room to adjust that in a year, in 2 years, and you only know to adjust it based on what you grew and your experience. So, what I'm trying to get to is making sure that you're accepting the year that I grew rutabagas, which I haven't grown in a few years. I really enjoyed growing them, but I didn't want to wait 110, 120 days for another crop, right? I already got that for my sweet potatoes, love them. But so those are the things that you have to flesh out in your garden experience year by year by year.
Yeah. Well, I-
That's maximizing your garden experience for me. That's different than your harvest,
so
but
let me
that's.
challenge you there
Mhm.
and say, in the name, in the title of the episode, garden like your life depends on it,
Mhm.
you're going to get more physically out of that cabbage. Now, you may not want to grow it as
Mhm.
much, but I get, and I 100% respect that, because look, I can get, get a lot more, let me even break it down further, a lot more calories out of my garden if I grow nothing but beets. But I think I'd rather starve to death than eat beets constantly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, um, but
In my garden, I'm going to get broccoli out of it first.
yeah,
So I'm going to eat broccoli first compared to cabbage as well, which gets an interesting
man, you
comparison.
had a lot of emphasis
Um,
behind eat there. It kind of put shivers down my spine. I'm gonna
yeah, I'm not
eat
sure
my
why,
broccoli
but
first. It felt
I was
strong.
forceful. Well, you know what? Maybe the secret behind that, if since we're doing true confessions, is broccoli has a better chance of getting consumed and cabbage has a better chance at being in the bottom of my refrigerator like, oh, I'm dying a slow death, right? um, that's all wrapped up in it. Kind of the gift of broccoli compared to cabbage is it's nothing like fresh broccoli from the garden.
Yeah,
Cabbage will give you a shelf life, refrigerator shelf life, longer than broccoli will. And
absolutely.
that's important, right? And that's the reason why I'm growing both. I'm not exclusively doing one or the other. What I'm trying to get to is I have to figure that out for me.
Right,
There's no like I can't there's no blueprint that I can give to you to say this is how you can maximize what you grow in your garden if you do exactly what I've just done.
right. So, by the way, since we've mentioned our technical difficulties earlier, we just hit a moment where it would normally have cut out and it didn't. So,
Oh,
yeah,
look at
yeah,
that.
we're working in the right direction, ladies and gentlemen.
Look at the
But
magic. I don't even know how you knew that it would normally cut out and that
because
it
you went,
didn't. Or are you just making that up?
no, it went,
Uh,
but then it kicked back in. So, but no, you, you start thinking about it in a term of calories that you're pulling out of it. But also, I don't think anybody should ever grow anything they don't want to eat. You know, like hands down. Like if you don't want to, like even if you think you're got a garden like your life depends on it, you can find something to put in there. You know, potatoes, for instance. I mean, who doesn't like a good old potato? So, you know, you get a fair amount of potatoes out of a small space if you do it correctly. But understanding your fertilization, very, 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 very important. Your
mm-hmm.
watering and your timing and how things can go in and come out of your garden can make all the difference in the world for you. I mean, if I'm going to make this statement that I make a lot, but it's really important here. If you don't plant it at the right time, it's not going to produce for you what you want it to produce, and you've wasted your time. And that's the cold, hard truth behind this. So you need to make note of like, hey, this didn't do good, and alter your plan. You know, if you get broccoli that bolts every single year, do something different, because it's never ever going to change until you do something different. It'll always be that way. And you will, and I hate to say it and be the Debbie Downer, but you will always fail unless you change it. So it's not just like, it doesn't come down to luck. It comes down to
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
you didn't do it right.
Yeah.
change it, and make it better. And so we do all of that, and then you can start putting the pieces together slowly but surely and start adding all of this in. And then you can up your production dramatically in that same small space.
Yeah. Uh, March is an interesting month. So when I look back at last month, it's interesting because I have more time on my hands, right? Still a bunch of things to do. I'm watching for squirrels that are, trying to mess with the things I'm hardening off right now. That's a whole job, right? But there's so many posts that I came across, not in the Backyard Gardens community garden group that's on Facebook, free to join, but on other pages that are garden and growing related, where you had people in warmer climates, think your you know, Californias, your Floridas, that were showing pictures of plants that didn't mature, plants that are like a day away from bolting. And then the reverse of that is you saw people that are in colder climates like me, think Wisconsin, think Illinois, you know, think Michigan. And it's interesting because they are showing you plants that they're ready to get outside, that are tomato plants, that are peppers. They're like, look at my 7-day forecast, and I'm screaming at the screen, no, right? Well in advance. And while I don't know them specifically, but I'm sure well in advance of any of their average last frost dates, right? And you talk about spacing, which is a key, and we're going to keep on drumming, beating these drums. Timing is such a key. Those folks that are in those warmer climates, I'm looking and saying that they very likely, watching my young Ben voice, very likely didn't plant those plants early enough, probably didn't feed them, right? But definitely didn't do one or both of those things. And then folks that are in these cooler, colder climates, they're like, my plants are out there. They look fine. It got down to 35 degrees. And I'm just like, you're setting yourself up for a level of heartbreak, and you don't have to, like the tools that are out there. And so I haven't seen it in the Backyard Gardens community garden Facebook group. If you happen to be that person, it's okay to post it, but learn from that lesson. To your point, you're not next year, you're just not going to do the exact same thing and then everything is going to be grand. No, make adjustments.
Yeah, you have to be flexible and make those adjustments.
Hmm.
It's of paramount. So you can, if you take and you go back, just what month are we in? We're in